Welcome. You are listening to Sleepy Historian. This is a quiet place, a place where history is allowed to move slowly, where nothing rushes you, where you do not need to remember everything you hear. If it is late where you are, you may already be settling in a bed. If it is earlier, you may simply be resting, letting the day loosen its grip. Either way, there is nothing you need to do right now. No effort is required. You can listen closely, or you can let the words drift past you, like smoke rising toward a dark roof. Tonight, we are not chasing battles or legends. We are not following heroes. We are not standing on cliffs or shouting across seas. Instead, you're stepping into a Viking Longhouse in winter. Not the version carved into memory by stories and symbols, but the real one, the ordinary one, the one where winter was not dramatic, but persistent. Before we go any further, you might gently adjust your breathing. Nothing formal. Just notice the air as it enters and as it leaves. A little slower, perhaps. A little quieter. If you enjoy these long, calm journeys through the past, you can gently support the channel by liking the video or subscribing to Sleepy Historian. Some listeners leave a comment describing where they're listening from or whether they fell asleep halfway through. All of that helps, but none of it is required right now. What matters is that you are here. Most modern ideas about Vikings focus on motion. Ships cutting through water, men shouting into the wind, axes raised, banners snapping, stories accelerating toward conflict. But winter was different. Winter was not loud. It did not arrive all at once. It pressed inward slowly, day by day, night by night. And most Viking lives, most of them, were spent not in motion, but in waiting. Waiting for light, waiting for storms to pass, waiting for cold to loosen its hold. You are about to spend time inside a longhouse while winter storms settle over the land. Not one storm, but many. Some remembered, most blending together. As you approach the memory of this place, imagine dusk rather than darkness. The sky already dim, but not yet black. Snow lying unevenly on the ground. Not fresh enough to feel new. Not old enough to be gone. The longhouse itself is low and heavy against the landscape. It does not rise proudly. It crouches, built to resist wind rather than welcome attention. Its walls are thick with timber, turf, and earth. They hold warmth imperfectly. They block wind incompletely. They do not promise comfort, only survival. You step inside. The door closes behind you with a solid, familiar sound. Not dramatic, just final. Immediately, the world narrows. The ceiling is low, darkened by years of smoke. Firelight moves slowly across the beams, never fully steady. The air is warm, but not clean. It carries the scent of ash, damp wool, animal bodies, and human breath. This is not a space designed for privacy. It is designed for endurance. People are already here, some sitting, some lying down, some working quietly with their hands. No one greets you loudly. There is no need. You are simply another body, adding a little warmth to the room. At the center of the longhouse, the fire burns low. Not blazing, not triumphant, just alive enough to matter. You notice how often people glance toward it. Not with affection, with calculation. Fire is not comfort. Fire is responsibility. Outside, the wind has begun its work. Not as a roar, but as pressure, a sound that does not demand attention, yet never leaves. This is where winter storms were lived through. Not with speeches, not with courage as we imagine it now. They were endured through routine. The storm does not change much inside the longhouse at first. The same tasks are done, the same movements repeated. Hands know what to do without thinking too much. That sameness is not accidental. It is protective. Excitement wastes energy. Strong emotion burns calories. So the longhouse settles into a careful stillness. You find a place along the wall. Not the warmest, not the coldest. Somewhere acceptable. Your body begins to register the details. The hard surface beneath you. The faint draft that reaches your ankles. The way smoke gathers higher up, leaving the lower air clearer. Time does not announce itself here. There are no clocks, no clear divisions, only the slow movement of firelight. The gradual dimming of whatever light remains outside. The quiet understanding that night will be long. Winter storms, in this world, were not events. They were conditions. They did not arrive to be faced. They arrived to be lived within. And as hours pass, you begin to understand something that modern stories often miss. The Longhouse was not a refuge from winter. It was a place where winter was allowed to exist, just a little farther away from the skin. Some nights, the wind presses harder. Some nights, snow piles against the walls. Some nights, the cold seems to lean inward, testing gaps and seams. No one panics. Panic is loud, and loud things fade quickly. Instead, there is adjustment. A cloak pulled tighter, a body shifted closer to another, a log added to the fire, carefully so it lasts. You may notice, even now, how slowly the words are moving. That is intentional, because this is how winter felt. Not sharp, not fast, slow enough that you could almost forget how long it had been. As you listen, you might already feel your own body responding. Breathing easing, shoulders lowering, thoughts becoming less urgent. If sleep comes, it is welcome. If wakefulness stays, that is fine too. Either way, the Longhouse remains. The storm continues, and time stretches forward, unmarked. In the next part, we will begin with the structure itself. The walls that held the cold back, barely.
You begin to understand the Longhouse by standing still inside it, not by walking, not by touching the walls, but by noticing what reaches you without asking. The cold is the first thing that explains the structure. It does not rush in. It does not strike. It arrives as suggestion, a quiet presence along the edges of your body. The walls around you are thick, layered with timber, turf, and packed earth. They were built this way for a reason. Each material slows the movement of wind. Each layer steals a little warmth before it can escape, but none of it stops the cold entirely. You feel it where the wall meets the ground, along your ankles, at the backs of your calves, in places where the earth outside presses inward. The Longhouse does not promise warmth. It promises less exposure. These walls are not smooth. They carry the marks of tools, of hands that shaped them while breath turned white in the air. They lean slightly in places, settling under their own weight after years of storms. You do not press your back fully against them. No one does, unless they must. The wall is always colder than the air a short distance away. People arrange themselves carefully, not randomly, not by comfort, by experience. Those who know the house best take positions that avoid the strongest drafts. Others accept colder places without comment. Complaining would change nothing, and sound wastes energy. As winter deepens, the walls become a kind of map. Everyone learns where the cold slips through first, where frost sometimes appears inside, faint and temporary, where moisture gathers and darkens the wood. During storms, the walls speak quietly, not with cracking or groaning, but with pressure. Wind presses against the outside, and the Longhouse answers by holding its shape. It does not resist heroically. It endures. You hear the wind before you feel it, a low sound that slides along the roof. Sometimes it finds a seam and hums there for hours. The sound does not change much. That sameness becomes reassuring. Inside, the air is warmer than outside, but heavier. Smoke gathers near the ceiling, trapped beneath the roof beams. Lower down where you sit or lie, the air is clearer but colder. The design is intentional. Warmth rises, smoke rises, so people remain low. You notice how rarely anyone stands fully upright. Movement is minimal. Gestures are small. Even breathing feels slower here. Outside, the storm may be gathering strength. Snow may be thickening. But inside the Longhouse, the change is subtle. A draft grows slightly stronger near the door. The fire is fed a little more often. Cloaks are pulled closer around shoulders. Nothing dramatic happens. That is the point. The walls were never meant to impress. They were meant to last. They do not keep winter out. They delay it. And that delay, measured in degrees, not miracles, is the difference between endurance and exhaustion. You imagine the storms pressing on night after night, snow piling against the outer walls, acting as both burden and insulation, ice forming where warmth leaks through. In the deepest cold, the walls feel closer, not physically, But mentally, the space seems to shrink as bodies cluster inward, not because of fear, but because heat matters more than comfort. You adjust your position without thinking much about it. Everyone does. Small changes matter. A foot moved closer to the fire's influence. A shoulder turned away from a draft. A cloak folded differently to cover exposed skin. These adjustments repeat themselves dozens of times a day. They are never discussed. Winter teaches efficiency quietly. The longhouse walls also carry sound differently during storms. Wind outside becomes a constant background, like breath. Occasionally, snow slides from the roof with a muted thump. No one reacts. Those sounds are familiar. They mean the roof is shedding weight. They mean the house is still doing its work. You learn to listen without alertness, without tension. Attention, like warmth, must be conserved. Over time, the walls absorb more than cold. They hold the smell of winter life, wet wool drying slowly, smoke clinging to wood, earth damp beneath packed floors. The scent becomes permanent. You stop noticing it unless something changes. That, too, is survival. Storms come and go outside. Inside, the longhouse remains largely the same. That sameness is what allows people to endure weeks of cold without breaking, without needing courage, without telling stories about resilience. The walls do not care how you feel. They simply continue to exist between you and the wind. As hours pass, you feel how the cold seeps inward gradually, not into the center of the space, but along its margins. People avoid those margins when they can. They place storage there. Tools, shields, anything that does not feel the cold. Human bodies stay closer together. You become aware of how much of winter survival depends on knowing where not to be. The longhouse teaches this without words. And as night deepens and the storm settles into its long rhythm outside, the walls hold. Not perfectly, not proudly, just enough. The fire sits at the center of the longhouse, but it does not dominate the space. It does not command attention. It asks for it. You notice this the longer you remain still. The flames are low, steady, and contained. They do not leap upward unless encouraged. They glow more than they burn. This is not a fire meant for spectacle. It exists to be managed. The hearth is shallow, edged with stone darkened by years of soot. Ash gathers in soft layers, disturbed only when someone kneels to tend it. Even that movement is careful. Too much air, and the fire consumes itself too quickly. Too little, and it fades into embers that no longer matter. Someone is always watching it, not staring, just aware. You begin to understand that the fire never truly rests. It cannot be left alone for long, especially in winter. If it dies, the longhouse changes immediately. Cold advances faster than people expect. The air thickens. Sleep becomes lighter. So the fire is fed in small, patient increments. A piece of wood placed, not thrown. A shift of embers, not a stir. No one warms themselves directly over for long. Standing too close wastes energy and invites smoke into the lungs. People warm gradually, by proximity rather than contact. You feel the fire's influence unevenly. One side of your body loosens. The other remains tight. That imbalance is familiar. No one complains. Smoke rises continuously, seeking the roof opening. It does not leave cleanly. It gathers under the ceiling beams first, forming a slow-moving layer that drifts back and forth as the wind outside shifts. Your eyes sting slightly at times. Your throat dries. This discomfort is accepted. Coughing is rare, not because smoke does not irritate, but because coughing draws attention, and attention invites concern. Instead, people adjust. Heads tilt downward. Breathing becomes shallower. You notice how children learn this early. They sit lower. They turn their faces away from thicker smoke without being told. The fire provides heat, but also demands fuel. That fuel has been gathered over months. Split, dried, stored with care. Every piece of wood placed into the hearth carries weight beyond its size. You sense this in the way hands hesitate before feeding the fire, in the way someone watches the flames afterward, measuring the response. The fire never solves the problem of winter. It slows it. You feel this most during long nights, when the fire is allowed to burn lower, not extinguished, just restrained. Too much fire means wasted wood. Too little means waking cold. So the flames are kept modest, even as the storm presses outside. At times, the fire crackles softly, a sound that momentarily draws the ear, but it quickly settles again. Loud fire is hungry fire. The light it casts is uneven. Faces appear and disappear as people shift. Shadows stretch and shorten along the walls. You begin to understand how little artificial light existed here. The fire does not fully illuminate the longhouse. It creates pockets of visibility. Beyond those pockets, darkness remains. This shapes behavior. Work is done near the hearth. Repairs, tool handling, food preparation, all happen where light allows. Other areas are left to rest. The fire also marks time, but only loosely. A new log suggests an hour or two has passed. Ash accumulation hints at the length of the night. There is no rush to keep track. Time, in winter, is not something to measure precisely. It is something to endure. As the storm outside strengthens, the fire responds subtly. Drafts change the way flames lean. Smoke thickens briefly, then thins. Someone adjusts the roof opening with a long tool. Just enough. You realize how practiced these movements are. No one discusses them. No one instructs. This knowledge lives in the body. The fire does not bring cheer. It does not create warmth in the way modern heating does. It creates zones. Near enough to matter, far enough to breathe. You find yourself shifting slightly closer without thinking, then stopping. Closer than this would mean smoke in your eyes. The fire teaches boundaries. It also teaches patience. There are moments when it seems almost inadequate, when the wind howls outside and the cold pushes harder the walls. Moments when the fire feels small. Those moments pass. Because the fire was never meant to win. It was meant to persist. Late in the night, someone rises quietly to tend it. The movement barely disturbs others. Sleep stirs but does not break. The fire brightens briefly, then settles. This cycle repeats many times before morning. Not exciting, not memorable, but necessary. By the time you stop noticing the fire entirely, it has done its work. Not by eliminating discomfort, but by making it manageable. And in winter, that is enough.
As the fire settles into its steady rhythm, your attention begins to drift away from it. Not because it no longer matters, but because something else becomes clearer. The warmth in the longhouse does not come only from flame. It comes from bodies. Human bodies. Animal bodies. Breath moving slowly through shared air. You notice this most when you remain still for a long time. Heat gathers gradually, almost imperceptibly. It does not arrive all at once. It accumulates. People sit close without acknowledging it. Not shoulder to shoulder exactly, but near enough that warmth overlaps. There is no sense of crowding, only necessity. Along the edges of the longhouse, animals rest. Not all of them, not always. But during winter storms, some are brought inside. Valuable animals. Animals that matter for survival. Their presence changes the air immediately. You smell them first. A dense, familiar scent. Damp hide, hay earth. Is not pleasant. Is not offensive. It simply exists. Their bodies give off steady heat, slow and reliable. They breathe deeply, rhythmically. That rhythm becomes part of the longhouse's background. You learn to recognize the sound of it. The soft exhale of a cow. The shifting weight of a sheep. The occasional stamp of a hoof. These sounds are not disturbances. They are reassurance. Animals do not pretend. If they are calm, the situation is manageable. People position themselves with this in mind. Not openly, not deliberately, but over time, sleeping places drift closer to animal warmth. Not too close, just enough. The air inside the longhouse thickens slightly as night deepens. Breath lingers. Moisture gathers. You become aware of your own breathing in response. Slower, shallower. There is no effort to separate one person from another. No attempt to claim space. Privacy is a modern idea. Here, survival outweighs it easily. People sleep in layers of clothing. Wool, leather, fur. Not because it is comfortable, but because removing layers invites cold into the body. You feel the stiffness of fabric when you shift, the way garments resist movement after absorbing smoke and damp. Sleep comes in stages. You rest. You wake. You rest again. Someone nearby shifts position, seeking warmth. A child curls closer to an adult without waking fully. An animal adjusts, releasing a brief cloud of warm breath. No one comments. This closeness also changes sound. Voices are rare at night. When they do occur, they are low and brief. Words are saved. The longhouse listens to itself. Coughs are suppressed when possible. Sighs are quiet. Even discomfort is managed silently. The shared air carries more than heat. It carries familiarity. Everyone knows the sounds of everyone else's sleep. The cadence of breathing. The small noises that signal rest rather than distress. You learn quickly which sounds matter. A sudden, sharp movement might draw attention. A cry might bring someone to sit up. But most nights pass without incident. You realize how much energy is saved by not reacting. Bodies adapt to each other over time. Heat balances. Movement synchronizes. The longhouse becomes a single, breathing space rather than many individuals. This shared air is not clean by modern standards. Smoke particles hang invisibly. Moisture clings to hair and skin. Yet illness is not constant. The body learns what to ignore. When storms last for days, the air grows heavier. Condensation forms on cold surfaces. Clothing dries slowly, if at all. You smell dampness more strongly then. It becomes part of everything. People change positions to avoid moisture when possible. They lay garments near the fire, not on it. They accept partial dryness. Animals do the same. They settle into stillness, conserving energy. At night, warmth shifts subtly as bodies cool during sleep. Someone wakes, pulls a cloak tighter, then settles again. No one asks if you're comfortable. Comfort is not the goal. The goal is to wake up. You begin to understand how winter storms are survived not by strength, but by shared stillness, by minimizing movement, by staying close, by breathing the same air without complaint. Morning, when it comes, does not arrive suddenly. Light seeps in slowly, finding gaps and edges. Before that, the longhouse exists in half-darkness. Fire embers glow. Bodies breathe. Some nights, someone does not wake. This is not discussed immediately. Space closes around absence quietly. But most mornings, people rise stiff and cold but alive. That is success. As the storm continues outside, and the longhouse remains sealed against it, you settle into the understanding that warmth here is not created. It is shared, and sharing in winter is survival.
Morning does not arrive in the longhouse the way it does in stories. There is no clear moment when night ends and day begins. No sudden change. Instead, you notice that the darkness loosens its grip slightly. The fire, still low from the night, begins to matter again, not because it grows stronger, but because the air around it becomes just visible enough to see. You lift your head, not fully awake, and sense that time has moved forward. Not far, just enough. Outside, daylight exists, but weakly. It presses against the longhouse rather than entering it. Only a faint, cold light slips through small openings, seems in structure the door when it is briefly opened. The sky in winter does not brighten fully. It becomes pale, flat, colorless. You sit up slowly. Stiffness moves through your body like a delayed signal. Joints respond one at a time. No one speaks right away. Sound would feel out of place in these first moments. Everyone listens instead to the fire, to breathing, to the wind outside. Tasks begin without announcement. Someone tends a hearth, coaxing the embers into a steadier glow. Another shifts tools closer to the light. A child is guided gently out of the way, not with words, but with a hand on a shoulder. You begin to understand how little winter daylight is trusted. There is no assumption that it will last, no belief that it will improve. Work is done with the understanding that visibility is temporary. Inside the longhouse, shadows dominate even during the day. The fire remains a primary source of light. Daylight only softens edges. This shapes the rhythm of activity. Fine work is saved for the brightest part of the day. A window of time that might last an hour or two. Rough tasks fill the rest. You notice how deliberate movements become. Nothing is rushed. Quick motion leads to mistakes. Mistakes cost energy. So hands move slowly. Eyes adjust carefully. You become aware of how the absence of brightness affects the mind. Thoughts drift more easily. Concentration comes and goes. There is no fighting this. People accept the dimness as part winter, the same way they accept cold. Outside, the storm may have paused, or it may still be moving across the land. Inside, the difference is minimal. The longhouse remains the center of everything. When the door opens briefly, light spills in, thin and cold. Snow reflected upward, creating a momentary brightness near the threshold. Then the door closes. The longhouse returns to its usual state. Animals shift as people move around them. They are aware of the change in light, even if it is slight. Their routines align with the human ones. Feeding happens slowly. Water is checked, sometimes chipped free of ice. You watch how daylight fades without warning. One moment, you can see your hands clearly. The next, you cannot. There is no frustration. This is expected. As afternoon passes, though it barely feels like afternoon, the fire is fed again. Not because it is colder, but because the light is leaving. The fire is asked to do double duty. Heat and visibility. You notice how this accelerates the return of smoke. Eyes sting again. Breathing adjusts. Still, no one complains. Winter days are not meant to be productive. They are meant to be survived. The longhouse reflects this truth back to its occupants. It does not encourage activity. It encourages conservation. By the time you realize that daylight is gone, it has already been gone for a while. Night does not announce itself either. The world simply narrows again. People settle back into closer arrangements. Tools are set aside. Movement slows. The storm outside may be returning to strength. Wind may be rising. Inside, the longhouse resumes its familiar pattern. Dimness in winter is not an inconvenience. It is a condition. And over time, you stop noticing how little you can see. Your body adapts. Your expectations lower. You begin to measure the day not by light, but by routine. The fire, the meal, rest. These markers replace the sun. And as the longhouse settles once more into evening, you understand that winter did not steal the day. It simply made it quieter. Food in winter does not announce itself with anticipation. There is no gathering excitement, no sharp division between hunger and fullness. You know when it is time to eat not because you feel hungry, but because the routine says so. The meal begins quietly. A pot is moved closer to the fire. Its contents have been there for hours, sometimes longer. A thin broth, grain softened by time rather than heat. Pieces of dried meat that have lost any memory of tenderness. The smell is faint, not unpleasant, just limited. You do not expect variety. Winter has narrowed choices carefully, month by month. What remains is what survives storage. Bowls are filled slowly. No one rushes. You notice how portions are measured without tools. Hands know what is enough, what must last. The first mouthful is warm rather than flavorful. Heat matters more than taste. You chew deliberately, not because it is difficult, but because slowing down allows the body to register nourishment. There is no conversation about the food, no praise, no complaint. Food is not evaluated. It is accepted. The broth coats your mouth and throat gently. You feel it settle in your stomach, not heavily, but steadily. This is not a meal meant to please. It is meant to carry you. Around you, others eat with the same quiet focus. Children are guided to eat slowly. Rushing leads to coughing, and coughing wastes energy. Someone dips a piece of bread into the liquid. Another saves a portion for later without comment. Nothing here is wasted. You notice how often the same foods return. Day after day, week after week. The sameness is intentional. The body adapts to predictability. Digestion becomes easier. Expectation lowers. Hunger does not disappear entirely. It settles into the background, a low, constant presence. The cold sharpens appetite, but winter does not allow indulgence. Calories are precious. Fuel must be rationed. You feel the balance being maintained carefully. Enough to function, not enough to feel heavy. After the meal, bowls are set aside. They will be used again. Perhaps soon, perhaps much later. The pot returns to its place near the fire. Its contents reduced slightly, but still present. Food is never finished. It is transformed. Throughout the day, small amounts are taken. A ladle here, a piece of dried meat there. Eating becomes a continuation rather than an event. You begin to understand how this shapes the experience of winter. There are no spikes of pleasure, no moments of abundance. There's only continuity. You also notice how eating affects the room. Steam rises briefly from bowls, adding moisture to the air. The scent of grain and fat lingers faintly, then fades. Animals respond as well. They shift, aware of feeding time. Their own portions are measured just as carefully. Nothing here eats freely. The body adjusts to this rhythm. Energy is released slowly. Warmth follows, modest but noticeable. For a short time after eating, the cold feels less pressing. Not gone, but quieter. That window is valued. People use it to move a little more, to complete small tasks, to prepare for the return of stillness. Later, hunger returns softly. It does not demand attention. You learn to ignore it. Winter teaches restraint without instruction. As days pass, the meals do not change much. Occasionally, a stored item is brought out, something preserved with extra care. These moments are acknowledged with slight attention, but not celebration. Celebration would raise expectations. The longhouse does not support expectation. Eating in winter is not about satisfaction. It is about maintenance, about keeping the body just capable enough to continue. And as you finish your portion and the bowl warms your hands one last time, you realize that this quiet discipline is what allows the storm to pass without breaking the people inside.
Night returns without ceremony. You do not notice the moment it arrives. You notice only that the longhouse has narrowed again, that the spaces between people feel smaller, that the fire has become the center once more. Sleep begins the same way each night. Carefully, you arrange your body not for comfort, but for efficiency. A shoulder angled away from a draft, feet tucked closer to warmth, clothing loosened just enough to allow circulation. There is no soft surface waiting for you, only layered materials that resist cold better than they welcome rest. You lie down knowing you will wake again. This knowledge does not disturb you. It prepares you. Sleep here is not a single descent into rest. It comes in shallow waves. You drift. You pause. You surface. The fire shifts and crackles softly. An ember collapses inward. Someone stirs. Your eyes open briefly, then close again. The cold never fully leaves your awareness. It presses gently, reminding the body to remain alert. Deep sleep will be dangerous, so the body stays near the edge. You become aware of how often people wake without moving. Eyes open for a moment, listening, not for danger, but for change. The wind outside has its own rhythm, sometimes steady, sometimes uneven. You learn which patterns matter. A new sound might mean drifting snow against the door. A sudden silence might mean the storm is shifted. Most sounds are ignored. Animals breathe heavily in their sleep. Their warmth rises and falls. That rhythm anchors the room. A child murmurs. An adult adjusts a cloak. No one speaks. Speech belongs to daylight. At intervals through the night, someone tends a fire. The movement is practiced and quiet. Light flares briefly, then settles. You feel warmth return to your face for a moment, then fade. Sleep responds accordingly. You drift deeper, then lighter. Time stretches. Without clocks, the night feels endless. But the body marks it anyway, by hunger returning faintly, by stiffness creeping back into joints, by the fire demanding attention again. You wake without sitting up, without looking that it is still night. This half-sleep continues for hours. Some people manage longer stretches of rest. Others wake often. No one expects otherwise. Winter sleep is not meant to restore fully. It is meant to preserve. Occasionally, someone does not wake when expected. There is no immediate reaction. Absence is noted quietly. Later, it will be addressed. Not now. Now, the night must be completed. You notice how the longhouse holds this shared vulnerability without comment. No one claims the night. No one owns sleep. The space remains neutral. Toward what might be morning, the fire grows lower again. Embers glow rather than burn. Cold creeps closer to the center of the room. You pull your covering tighter without waking fully. Breath becomes visible again. Somewhere above, smoke thins as the roof opening adjusts to shifting wind. Fresh cold air enters briefly. You wake, then sleep again. When light finally begins to return, it does not wake everyone at once. Some stir early. Others remain still. Sleep releases its hold reluctantly. You rise stiff, aware that rest was partial, but sufficient. That is all winter ever offers. As you sit up, joints protesting softly, you understand that sleep here was never about escape. It was about survival through repetition. Night after night, storm after storm, and as the longhouse prepares once more for a dim day, you carry the quiet understanding that endurance does not require deep rest. Only enough.
The wind does not announce itself like a visitor. It does not knock or demand attention. It arrives gradually, pressing against the longhouse as if testing its patience. You notice first a subtle vibration in the timber, a low hum that runs along the beams. Not constant, not predictable. Outside, snow drifts and settles. But inside, the longhouse perceives these movements differently. Through walls, through floorboards, through the very structure itself. The sound is steady, unremarkable, yet impossible to ignore. It is always present. You cannot close your ears to it. The wind shapes the longhouse, and the longhouse shapes those inside. Every occupant adapts, unconsciously at first. A foot shifts slightly closer to warmth. A cloak is pulled tighter. A child is moved a fraction of a handspan. No conversation occurs. All changes are silent. The wind teaches patience. It does not blow violently through the walls. It presses softly, consistently. A slow, insistent weight that never tires. The walls creak under its insistence, but do not collapse. You feel the movement more than you hear it. In the subtle sway of beams, in the micro shivers that run up a leg or along a shoulder. The storm outside may rage or pause, but the pressure within remains. You notice how people adjust over time. Positions shift in anticipation of drafts. Blankets are layered just enough. Bodies huddle closer together, not from fear, but from practicality. Animals, too, respond to the pressure. They press into corners, against walls, or near fire. Even their breaths join the slow rhythm of the space. Noise is minimal. Every sound has weight. Even shifting a hand, too, quickly draws attention. The longhouse itself becomes a listening entity. Every occupant senses its language. The walls tell stories of the wind, where it presses hardest, where moisture gathers, where frost forms on the timbers. Outside, the wind may howl more fiercely, but inside, it is a persistent reminder. Never violent, never dramatic, but always demanding awareness. Sleep is lighter under its presence. The deep rest of earlier seasons is replaced by vigilance, not conscious alertness, just a body attuned to subtle pressure. At times, the wind carries scents. Frozen pine, snow pressed into earth, smoke from distant fires. These scents mingle in the longhouse with warmth and animal musk. They are carried through gaps, seams, and cracks. You notice the effect on rhythm. Tasks, even those of survival, are slowed. Every motion measured, every step considered. The wind stretches time. Hours pass differently when the wind presses. Minutes feel longer. Silence becomes more pronounced. Even breathing is synchronized to it. You learn where to place yourself, not to avoid danger, but to conserve heat, energy, and attention. The longhouse offers zones of refuge. Near the hearth, near walls that are less penetrated, in the middle of clustered bodies. These choices are never spoken. Outside, snow shifts relentlessly. The longhouse shudders subtly. You might not notice at first. Then you do. Then you adjust. Some nights, the wind becomes the central actor of the longhouse, not in sudden gusts, but in its constancy. It presses against your skin, even through layers of clothing. It finds the thin places in walls, seams, and coverings. It tests endurance quietly. You realize that survival in such conditions is not about strength or heroism. It is about repetition, adjustment, observation. You drift between wakefulness and sleep, feeling the wind as a subtle force. It reminds you that the longhouse is not separate from the storm, but a buffer against it. You notice how the longhouse absorbs these pressures, how it flexes without giving in. And in response, the people inside mirror it. Quiet endurance, calm persistence. Morning, when it arrives, does not change the wind. It merely alters perception. For hours, for nights, for weeks, this pattern repeats. The wind presses, the longhouse absorbs. People endure, and still they continue. Winter does not forgive dampness. Not in clothing, not in hair, not in the air that presses through the longhouse walls. You notice at the moment you remove a layer. A sleeve or a cloak lifts, and the cold rushes in immediately. The fabric resists movement, heavy with moisture that never fully disappears. Every layer has a story. It has absorbed smoke, frost, sweat, and time. It retains heat, but only partially. It shields, but does not comfort fully. You tug a woolen tunic over your head. The fibers cling to your skin. Your fingers trace the stiffness where the damp has stiffened the weave. Even the softest furs press uncomfortably. People learn to accept this. There is no attempt to make clothing entirely dry. That would be impossible. Instead, they layer carefully, adjusting thickness in response to drafts. Adding a cloak here, a fur there, movement becomes deliberate. You bend to adjust a hem or fold a garment, and the weight of damp fabric reminds you to move slowly. Hasty gestures strain muscles, chill skin, and invite discomfort. At the edges of the longhouse, garments hang near the fire, not to be fully dried, but to release just enough warmth and stiffen slightly before being worn again. Hands that handle these garments move with routine precision. Each motion carries memory. Each placement prevents wasting precious warmth. Children imitate the adults, learning to lift, fold, and position layers without needing instruction. Their small hands know instinctively where warmth will linger longest. The weight of wet clothing presses constantly, unnoticed at first. Then you feel it, the subtle pull against shoulders, the damp pressing cold against thighs, the stiffness along the back. People do not complain. There is no benefit. Instead, they adjust posture, shift position, layer again, and accept that dryness is never complete. The longhouse itself contributes to this equilibrium. Air is warmed unevenly by the fire. Smoke rises to the ceiling. Condensation forms along the beams. Clothing placed near the fire warms slowly, but heat is uneven. Some fibers retain dampness longer than others. Moisture migrates from sleeve to body, cloak to garment, coat to coat. You notice how this changes movement. A footstep is measured. A shift of weight is controlled. Even bending, sitting, or kneeling is adjusted to avoid disturbing soak layers. Animals, too, are damp. Their fur holds frost. Their breathing moistens the air further. They become part of the same cycle as humans. Warmth shared, dampness endured. This teaches subtle coordination. You learn to move without disturbing others, to fold fabric without losing heat, to wear the damp as if it were light, not weight. The fire offers partial relief. You lift garments closer, feeling heat penetrate slowly. It never reaches a core of wetness, only the surface, enough to delay shivering. Throughout the day and night, garments cycle between use and near drying, between warmth and weight, between comfort and cold reminder. You notice how people avoid unnecessary undressing. Layers remain in place for long stretches. Clothing becomes part of the body's rhythm, not optional, not fully effective, but essential. At times, you catch yourself adjusting a sleeve or shifting a cloak, not for warmth, but for the familiarity of movement. This rhythm continues through hours of dim light and persistent wind. The body internalizes the weight of wet fabric, and endurance becomes second nature. By night, garments are heavier, but familiarity tempers the discomfort. By morning, the cycle begins anew. Each layer tells a story of survival, of adaptation, of quiet persistence. You realize that clothing in winter is less about insulation and more about management. It reminds you constantly of fragility, endurance, and subtle balance. No garment dries fully, yet life continues.
Night stretches in winter as if it has no end. It does not follow the patterns of day. It does not yield. It only continues. You feel this first when you lie down after the fire has been banked low. The longhouse seems smaller, though nothing has changed. Shadows gather in corners. The low roof feels heavier. Even the air seems to press closer. Time becomes elastic. You lose track of hours. Minutes feel like decades. Yet nothing happens. Nothing breaks the monotony. The cold continues its quiet work. It seeps into layers of clothing that were only partially dry. It touches skin that has been warmed slowly by clustered bodies and the fading fire. You notice every small sensation. The stiffness of joints, the tightness in shoulders, the way your hands tingle when you move them, the prickling chill along the nape of your neck. Sleep is shallow. Even when your eyes are closed, you are half present, half alert. The longhouse breathes around you. Soft creaks of timber, shifts of animals, the subtle crackle of remaining embers. Each sound is amplified in the stillness. Yet none demands attention. They are markers of survival, not alarms. You count hours in small segments. A minute of breath, a shift of posture, a glance toward the embers, then back to stillness. Outside, the storm may rage. You cannot see it clearly. You can only hear its presence through the longhouse walls. A soft, persistent pressure. The world beyond the timber continues, but you remain here, enclosed. Fatigue accumulates slowly. It is not sudden. It is a creeping weight. It rests on shoulders, knees, the small of the back. It makes movement deliberate. Thoughts slow. Dreams arrive in fragments, then vanish. You notice others in the longhouse. They are motionless, or shifting imperceptibly, breathing in rhythm with the fire and the animals. You sense their presence without words. The long nights teach endurance. You realize that what matters is not deep rest. It is preservation. Preservation of warmth, energy, and awareness. Even the act of lying still is a choice that carries survival value. Sometimes, sleep is broken. A child stirs. A cloak falls to the floor. An animal shifts. A cough escapes. None of these moments is alarming. They are simply part of the night. The rhythm continues. You adjust. You wait. You learn to measure time by repetition rather than events, by breath rather than light, by subtle pressures rather than sudden markers. The night seems endless, yet morning eventually seeps in, not with brightness, not with ceremony, but as a faint sense of change. Even then, the sensation of a long, uninterrupted night lingers. The body remembers the weight of hours spent in partial sleep. The mind remembers the quiet, persistent pressure of cold and dark. By the time light touches the longhouse again, you are aware of how much endurance has been required. Not heroically, not dramatically, but quietly, continuously. And as the new day begins, you carry with you a subtle understanding. Winter nights are not conquered. They are lived through. They leave their imprint on bodies, routines, and the very rhythm of the longhouse. You awaken, but a part of you remains in the endless dark, attentive to its lessons.
The storm finally recedes, though you know it will return. There is no triumph, no celebration, only the quiet. Silence fills the longhouse like a soft, tangible presence. Not emptiness, not relief, just a pause. You notice it first in the sound of your own breathing. It seems louder now, more deliberate, pausing to occupy the space that wind and snow once held. The fire flickers, unchallenged by drafts. Smoke rises straight toward the roof opening, leaving the air clearer than it has been for days. You inhale deeply, appreciating the calm without consciously realizing it. Animals settle differently. They stretch slightly, shake out frost from fur, reposition themselves in a way they could not during the storm. Even their breathing carries a lighter weight. People move slowly, deliberately. Tasks resume not because they must, but because the silence permits it. Water is checked, food portions readied, clothing adjusted, the hearth coaxed back to life. There's a rhythm in this stillness. It is not hurried. It is observant, deliberate. You notice small sounds, the scrape of a wooden bowl against the table, the softness of water being ladled, the faint clink of metal tools set aside, all amplified against the backdrop of calm. No one speaks. Words would break the fragile balance. The longhouse holds them anyway. Outside, the snow continues to fall slowly, but its pace is different now. Measured, polite, almost contemplative. The storm's absence is temporary, and yet it changes everything. You feel more mobile, more capable, though not entirely safe. Movement is lighter, posture straighter, yet the constant awareness of what could return tempers action. You observe people tending their tasks with subtle coordination. Children shift quietly, learning to move in the rhythm of this calm. Adults carry out chores with efficiency born a habit. Even animals respond, pressing closer or farther depending on the moment. You sense the longhouse as a single organism. Breath, movement, warmth, and stillness synchronize. The silence is not passive. It has weight. It has purpose. This is a lesson of the pause. Endurance is not only measured in resisting storms. It is measured in how one inhabits the quiet that follows. Time stretches. Minutes feel longer without external interruption. You notice your own heartbeat more clearly, each thump deliberate, each pulse a quiet affirmation that the body continues. Meals are taken more slowly. The fire is tended with patience. Small repairs to tools or clothing occur without urgency. Even conversations, when they occur, are whispers, careful and soft. You begin to sense how energy is conserved in these moments. Heat is not wasted. Movement is minimized. Attention is held selectively. The longhouse, though calm, is attentive. Outside, distant trees sway faintly in the residual wind. Snow continues its descent with a muted hush. The storm's remnants are visible in drifts and thin layers of ice. But the longhouse remains a sanctuary, not in grandeur, but in quiet sufficiency. The silence is instructive. You learn the rhythm of absence. You learn to anticipate the storm's return without alarm. You practice patience without conscious effort. You notice the smallest changes. A beam that has shifted slightly, a patch of frost that did not melt, a shadow that has lengthened on the far wall. These are subtle markers of time passing, of survival proceeding unhurried. Eventually, the fire dwindles and the longhouse prepares for another night. You realize that the storm will return, but you carry the calm forward, layering your body with warmth and careful movement, ready to endure once more. The quiet between storms is a teacher. It shows the longhouse not as a shelter alone, but as a space for measured endurance, for patience, and for the slow accumulation of strength. Hunger in the longhouse is quiet. It is not a shout, not a pang demanding attention. It is a slow, persistent presence, a gentle reminder of the body's needs rather than an urgent call. You notice it first in the hollow of the stomach, a low, dull sensation, not sharp, not insistent, merely a background rhythm. People do not speak of hunger here. It is understood. It is expected. A constant companion in the rhythm of winter. Meals are small and measured, enough to sustain, but never enough to satisfy completely. Bread, grains, thin broth, scraps of preserved meat. These are components of endurance, not indulgence. You notice how people eat. Slowly, deliberately, each bite taken with awareness. Not because it tastes particularly good, but because it matters that each morsel counts. There is no complaint, no negotiation, no dramatization of desire. Hunger is acknowledged silently. Children follow the rhythm instinctively. They do not demand. They mimic adults, learning to take only what is necessary, to pace themselves, to conserve. The fire provides warmth. The clothing layers insulate, but hunger persists. It is never fully absent. It is part of the environment like cold or darkness. You notice its effect on movement. Every task is measured. No energy is wasted. Even small motions are deliberate. The longhouse teaches efficiency in every gesture. Meals are occasions, but not celebrations. Bowls are filled carefully. Portions divided evenly. Nothing is extravagant. Nothing is fleeting. Hunger shapes the day. It punctuates a routine, but softly, not with drama, but with persistent awareness. It is a force felt more than acted upon. The body adjusts. Metabolism slows naturally. Energy is preserved. The mind aligns with this quiet state of endurance. You watch how adults manage children's portions, guiding but never urging, distributing food carefully, ensuring everyone gets enough, teaching restraint through quiet example. Animals, too, participate in this careful balance. They are fed just enough, their hunger acknowledged, but never exaggerated. Even the act of chewing, swallowing, and drinking becomes deliberate. Each motion is mindful, part of a shared understanding that survival requires patience. The longhouse itself enforces this subtle discipline. Movement, sound, and light are restrained. Everything is measured against the ongoing presence of hunger. You sense the invisible rhythm it creates. A pulse in the body, a rhythm in the room, a quiet, constant presence that shapes thought and motion alike. There is no relief in abundance. There is no rush to satisfaction. Only endurance. Measured, consistent, unremarkable. You understand that this is winter's lesson. Hunger is not an emergency. It is a companion, a teacher, a condition to be observed, not resisted. And when the day drifts toward the dimming light of early evening, you notice that hunger does not disappear. It softens, yes, but it remains a presence. A reminder that endurance, rather than indulgence, is a constant. You rise from the shared meal quietly, aware that energy is preserved, that the body has been nourished just enough to continue, and that the longhouse holds the same steady rhythm as the storm approaches once again.
Winter is indifferent. It does not strike violently, but it removes quietly, without ceremony, without urgency. In the longhouse, some do not wake again, not in dramatic fashion, not in sudden alarm, but gently, almost imperceptibly. Morning fails to come for them. The body ceases its rhythm without warning, leaving only a faint absence, a space previously occupied. You notice it first in subtle shifts. A person does not stir at their usual time. A breath is slower, less frequent. A hand remains unmoved. No one panics. No loud cries. The longhouse is trained in quiet endurance, and in the understanding that life and death can coexist in proximity. Others continue their routines, sliding along the edge of awareness. Tasks must be done. The fire must be tended. Meals prepared and consumed. Bodies warmed and layered. You learn to observe without overreaction, to acknowledge without dramatizing. Death is not a spectacle here. It is a continuation of the winter's slow pressure. Children sense it without fully understanding. They notice the missing presence, the shift in warmth, the quiet left behind. Adults manage the absence methodically. Bodies are moved gently. Space is cleared. The hearth is maintained. The rhythm of the longhouse persists. You notice how even those who continue living adjust subtly. A chair left unoccupied. A blanket folded differently. A corner of the room feels quieter. Movement slows slightly in recognition of the missing rhythm. The absence becomes part of the longhouse's environment. Not mourned loudly, not dramatized, but incorporated into the ongoing patterns of survival. Meals are eaten with a quiet awareness. Portions may be adjusted slightly. The warmth shared among the living shifts imperceptibly. You feel the subtle redistribution of energy. You notice the ways people preserve the memory of the absent. Small gestures, a cloak placed neatly where it was worn, a bowl set aside, a favorite seat left undisturbed. These gestures do not prevent the inevitable. They are a quiet acknowledgement, a small act of continuity. Sleep comes more carefully now. The longhouse collectively senses fragility. Bodies lie closer. Breath and warmth are shared with awareness. The storm outside continues its rhythm. The pressure of wind, cold, and snow remains constant. It does not respect absence or presence. It is indifferent to life or death. You notice your own heartbeat in response. The rhythm of survival feels heavier. You are aware of how easily it could be disrupted, how delicate the balance truly is. And yet, life continues. Tasks proceed. Children learn. Animals breathe and move. The fire flickers and sustains warmth. Absence teaches quiet lessons. It reminds you of endurance, of attention to subtle signs, of care without expectation, of life maintained not in triumph, but in persistent continuity, even in the presence of those who do not wake again. The longhouse does not pause entirely. It holds itself in rhythm, absorbing both loss and persistence. All survival depends not on celebration, but on measured awareness and gentle attention. By morning, the longhouse continues its routines. The missing body is noted, acknowledged, and the rhythm adjusts. The lesson is clear. Survival does not shield from absence. It accommodates it quietly, persistently, without dramatization.
You have lived through another winter night in the longhouse. Storms have come and gone. Winds have pressed against timber walls. And firelight has flickered through smoke and shadow. Now, as the final embers settle, you reflect quietly on what these mountains, these winters, have demanded. There is no glory here, no triumph, no heroic tale, only measured endurance, only the slow rhythm of bodies, clothing fire and breath. The longhouse has been a teacher, its walls absorbing cold, storm, and human effort, its space filled with persistence, patience, and quiet care. You notice how small gestures carry weight. The careful layering of wool and fur, the precise distribution of food, the gentle tending of animals, the patience with sleep that never fully comes. All of these form a subtle, constant harmony, a rhythm that sustains life quietly, day after day, night after night. Some did not wake again. Some left the longhouse without ceremony, and yet life continued. The fire burned. Children stirred. Animals pressed close for warmth. Routines repeated with deliberate calm. Survival was not heroic. It was silent. It was ordinary. You reflect on your own presence in this space. How small adjustments matter. How awareness is a tool for endurance. How warmth is both physical and shared. How care is expressed not in words, but in subtle movements, positioning, and the rhythm of attention. Modern life offers comfort unimaginable here. Soft beds, dry clothing, abundant food. Yet there's a lesson in the restraint of the longhouse. That life is maintained not by abundance, but by careful observation, patience, and respect for subtle forces. Even now, as you drift toward your own rest, you carry the echoes of winter's quiet requirements. The wind, cold, and night continue elsewhere, beyond the timber walls, beyond the mountains, beyond the longhouse that is sheltered endurance without ceremony. The longhouse teaches that comfort is relative. It teaches that quiet attention preserves life. It teaches that endurance is found in repetition, in measured breathing, in shared warmth, in careful adjustment to circumstance. The lessons of absence remain. Those who did not wake again leave a space that is both sorrowful and instructive. You understand that loss is part of the long rhythm of winter. It shapes behavior, but does not dominate it. You notice how time itself feels different here. Hours stretch and compress according to survival needs rather than clocks. Sleep is fragmented, yet life continues steadily. Energy is managed. Effort is measured. Awareness is constant but not frantic. As the first pale light of morning filters through the roof opening, the longhouse continues its slow cycle. The fire is banked again, tasks resumed, bodies warmed, routines preserved. Even as you depart mentally from this space, you carry with you the calm persistence of these nights, the stillness, the subtle pressures, the quiet endurance. The longhouse's lessons echo softly. That survival is measured not in heroic feats, but in attention, in consistency, in the quiet accumulation of effort over time. And so, as you settle into your own space and warmth, you may feel the echo of winter and the longhouse. How patience and presence, subtle observation, and measured care can sustain life even when the world presses cold and indifferent. Sleep may now be deeper than it was within those timber walls, but the rhythm of endurance remains. The longhouse, the storm, the wind, the cold, all have taught a quiet, enduring truth. Survival does not demand drama. It demands observation. It demands care. It demands repetition. And if you listen closely, you will carry that quiet strength with you through every night, every storm, and every pause between.